back with another episode of Mission Control, the BWE podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Denchev. For this episode, I sat down with Gerry Flynn, owner of Polar Star Properties. He's a client of BWE Senior Vice President Anthony Martin. Gerry is an affordable housing owner and developer in Colorado. For this episode, he discusses the affordable housing community Spring Creek, which they built and opened in Gypsum, Colorado back in 2020. A unique aspect of this property that he discusses in this podcast is how they built the entire 282-unit property using modular construction. This interview was recorded earlier this year as a part of our Working Together campaign, where we traveled to various affordable housing properties across the country to speak to property owners and managers, as well as residents, about home and what having a high-quality, affordable place to live means to them. Visit BWEstorybook.com to hear the full stories. And now, the full interview with Gerry Flynn. We talked to the residents and everything like that, and one of the questions that I kind of asked was, obviously I think it was summer of 2020 is when that property opened. So pretty recent when everyone moved in there. And we kind of asked them, when you were looking for somewhere to live that's affordable, what kind of other options were there? And every resident we asked that pretty much said there's basically nothing in the area. So I guess if you can speak on the importance of affordable housing specifically in this area, and kind of what that whole industry is looking like, why there's maybe not a whole lot of options, like what the whole status of the affordable housing in this area looks like.
It has been a chronic issue in resort communities. Throughout the state and really around the country. When you've got, I think the biggest, probably the number one reason is it's rarely the highest and best use of developable land. And in Eagle County, as in much of Colorado, there's not a lot of developable land. I mean, I think 75% of the land in Eagle County is federal land. And most of the private land is in the valley floor. And to build affordable housing anywhere here, you want it to be on the valley floor, close to transportation. And those sites are hard to come by. When you do have sites available for development, typically it's going to go to it might be a condominium development, a higher end asset class than rental housing. And it's been identified as the number one problem by all the political entities in the valley, really since the late 60s, early 70s, after the ski area opened. And there was a very short time after the 2008 downturn that the problem subsided, but it was 2 or 3 years, and then everything was full again. I mean, an example of why people said that there's no other options. We manage another 500 units up in the upper valley, and we've got wait lists that long enough that they could be 3, 4, 5 year wait lists to find a place to live. So when people are trying to hire in Eagle County and in other resort communities, a lot of times the first question they ask is, do you have a place to live? And in an interview, and if the answer is no, interview is pretty much over.
Yeah.
It's just very hard to come by.
And you speak about identified as the top problem, and politically people that's on the forefront of everyone's minds, trying to figure I guess if you can speak on what's being done in that respect to try to mitigate the fact that there is no affordable housing.
The entitlement jurisdictions, whether it be Eagle County or the cities and towns, they've all tried to prioritize housing, and for a long time they just didn't understand how they could have a real impact. We're finally seeing funding for housing. There's certainly incentives created by the county to get this type of project approved. Sometimes it works better than others. I mean, it's still a long process, and it's just what's inherent in land use regulations and entitlements is just all these impact fees that they sometimes will waive some of that for affordable housing, but they're just getting there now, and this has been a problem for 40 years. We've done, the county and the County Housing Authority have done several studies over the years of lack of affordable ownership and rental housing. And at one point, and this is about 5 or 6 years ago, it was a housing needs analysis that they did, and the numbers they identified as housing needs over the next 5 or 10 years, they said they were 5,000 units behind, or about 4,500 units behind at that time. That number was going to grow to 8,000 units within a few years. Yet at that time, nothing was getting built. And I think those numbers are exaggerated. I mean, if we built 8,000 units tomorrow, it'd be tough to fill them. But just the existence of that study kind of get everybody focused on what the magnitude of the problem is. Although having said that, the only rental properties that have been built in the valley in the last 5 years, there's one here in Edwards, 125 units. There's one in Avon, very high priced, that's 280 units. And then our 282 units in Gypsum. And nothing else on a large scale has happened in really more like 10 years. Those are the three that have come online.
With that being said, like, why do you think that is? Is it a space? Is it people not being able to get the funding that makes sense? Is it a combination? Like, what's the purpose of that?
It's a whole variety of factors, but you'd certainly say today, cost of construction is a major obstacle. Funding is difficult. The structure for Spring Creek, both the tax credit structure and phase 2, we targeted it. The word everybody wants to use now, workforce housing. Still affordable, but not as restricted as low-income housing tax credits. All those are complicated, very complicated, and they're very, lots of third-party, studies and costs and legal fees. And on the first phase of Spring Creek, I had, 8 different law firms working on the project for somebody. So it is, cost is an obstacle, the lack of land is an obstacle. But I would say construction cost is what's made it, impossible. And I don't know if you talked at all yesterday about modular construction versus factory-built construction versus on-site. We never could have done the project if we did the traditional way of building, because construction costs in this valley are just through the roof. And it's a lot of it's demand driven. After the 2008 downturn, we lost a lot of construction trades. People that either went elsewhere or changed jobs, and that hasn't really come back. So all of these units were built in Boise, Idaho, in a factory, and it's probably the only way multifamily can get done. Not just here, but you'd say the same thing in Aspen. You'd say the same thing in Summit County, to our east. Factory-built housing is probably the way of the future of getting this stuff done. And we started out, we initially designed it for modular construction, and there's all kinds of advantages. Repetitive construction, consistent quality, because you're basically building it on an assembly line in a factory, and everybody's got one job to do. And I'll call them, for lack of a better term, boxes. Every unit in Spring Creek rolled down the highway in a 72-foot by 13.5-foot wide box, and then put the puzzle together when it gets on site. Wow. But it was very consistent. I mean, every box was that size. So my point is, repetitive construction is pretty critical. You can't be you can't over-design these things. It's just going to cost more. Yeah,
I mean, that kind of leads to a good point, though. Like, being out there, the looks, the feel, like, it doesn't, when people may think about affordable housing, that might not be what they have in mind. I mean, it's pretty high quality. It looks really nice. It seems, very comfortable to live there. But to have it all be affordable, come through and be built and from somewhere else brought in and everything like that, like how are you able to, and then like why, like the quality, I guess, if we can speak on the quality of the property, why, how, all that kind of stuff.
There's so many benefits when you can work indoors in a controlled environment. You can be much more productive. You're not dealing with weather and all those issues. When you do it, I think our factory had 25 or 26 stations as it rolled through the factory, and everybody is it's on a schedule. It moves at given increments, and everybody's got to be done with their piece of the it starts with framing lumber, and then just goes up from there. Walls.
How long is that process, like from the start of when you first started the construction part somewhere else to the part where it's here built, first person's moved in? How long does that process typically take?
That's the other huge benefit of factory built is speed. We built phase 2. The first box started on the assembly line in early February, and the first units were occupied in early August, so 6 months.
When you talk about the challenges and the financing and funding is difficult to get, and the space, like all that being said, yet you're still doing Spring Creek, you still put 280. So I guess why do this property? Why do Spring Creek, and how, you could have easily done something probably market rate, a lot high more end, but
the site might lend itself to market rate. I mean, we've done a lot. There's a lot of single family homes there. We sold, when we bought that property, we bought 31 acres, and we sold off the first 76 units to Habitat for Humanity. They're building duplex homes there. We sold 15 single-family lots to a home builder, and then we sold off another, let's say, 60 townhouse sites. Go back to, I guess the question: why did we do this?
Sure.
I've been in multifamily. I focused in multifamily since I worked for Vail Resorts, the ski, the mountain operator. Housing was a huge issue for us, and I was CFO of Vail for 12 years, and somehow housing fell under my area of expertise. That's how we got some of the projects started in Avon. Was the ski company was one of many kind of stakeholders who collaborated to build housing. So I did it because I know what the demand is. I know how to do it. I've got a partner who's a civil engineer who's been my partner through all of these projects. And there was very few other people in the Valley focused on rental housing. And some who were, actually many developers have come to this Valley and tried to do this and failed because they don't understand. They either don't understand the politics, they don't understand the cost of construction. There's way too many examples of somebody coming from El Paso, Texas, and thinking they can build here for $100 a foot, and they're surprised when they find out it's $200 a foot. And it shouldn't be $200 a foot because your materials are similar. It's the labor. It's the labor that just drives the cost of all construction here sky high.
I guess if you can speak on why it's important to you to be one of the few contributors to providing affordable housing in this area.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my partner Jeff and I really did set out to solve a problem, and I knew it was going to be. It's a chronic problem. We can't build enough of this stuff. And if I go way back to the beginning, we were working with some lenders in Denver that I knew. We were working with the town manager of Avon, who was also very focused on housing. And we spent the better part of a year visiting various consultants in Denver. And a lot of them were, a lot of it was legal structure and how can we get this done? How can we take advantage of tax-exempt financing? How do we secure a property tax exemption? All these things matter. When you start out, you've got projects, they just don't pencil. And then you say, okay, how am I gonna solve this? And property tax exemption is a perfect example. If I can secure that exemption and just use a number, say my property taxes are $100,000 a year. If I can eliminate that operating cost, I can borrow 15 times that up front. My maximum debt proceeds I can increase by $1.5 million by securing that exemption. There's a whole series of those types of things you do to finally get your budget to balance, and you got sources that that can cover all of your costs. And a lot of your costs in these are not just building the buildings; it's impact fees, offsite improvements. Not just counties and towns here, but everywhere they try to people in charge of land use are trying to get infrastructure improvements paid for by developers, and it makes sense. I mean, we are having impacts. In this project, the ones down there that were very sensitive to this were a fire department. I say it's a small fire department, but they've got a jurisdiction over several thousand acres, around tens of thousands of acres around Gypsum. I think I saw a map. It might have been 50 square miles is their reach, and they don't have necessarily a project like this will generate EMT calls, obviously fire. It just has a big impact on them, and we pay huge fees to fire department to accommodate. This might be what causes them to have to buy the next ladder truck, and that's not a cheap piece of equipment. So,
lastly, we speak about what you've built here, the 280 or so units. It's a need for a lot more, I guess. What's your outlook on the future? Are you looking to do more of this type of housing? Is there more phases coming? Like, what's your outlook on, you've had some impact so far. I'm sure you want to have some more. What does that look like?
We'll continue to be in this business. There's also, there's others who now are finally focused on, this kind of product and where we can build it. But what competes with it is we've had a run-up in housing prices, just like other rural areas around the country. COVID had a lot to do with it. Driving people out of the cities and into communities like this. And we've had lengthy discussions whether that's temporary phenomenon or whether that's here to stay. And the conclusion most have come to is, that's here to stay. I mean, it's going to be a long time before we see that reverse, and in a significant way, population is going back to the city. So, with the run-up in real estate prices here, we've just had 2 record years in a row, 20 and then 21, and it's just exacerbated the problem because whatever land is available for development is going to serve that demand also, and it's government entities who have to help prioritize, and we've got a county housing regulations to say anything you build now, there's going to be some affordable component associated with it. If you want to build 100 market units, you're going to have to reserve 30 of those to meet some level of affordability, and those kinds of things help. But they don't. It doesn't result in a large-scale project like this. I mean, we came at this saying, all we're going to do is 2 phases of affordable.